One of the tools of negotiation for a merchandiser is costing. If you do have very good idea about costing, then there is a chance that your company will be the winner in the negotiation process. And usually we use this type of costing formats. So for example, we use in our apparel sector, fabric cost is one of the main component of costing. And then we also use, trims cost, another component of garments manufacturing, and another component of the cost calculation in conventional system is CM cost. So these are the three components of a cost sheet that today's merchandisers are using in day-to-day operations to calculate the costing. And in you know fabric cost, trims cost, and same cost altogether is known as the FOB cost in our literature. But as you know, there are 11 incoterms. One of them is FOB. Other than FOB, there are several incoterms we have already discussed, and we will also discuss. And these are also the tools of negotiation. And fabric cost, ultimately, what are the raw materials, raw fabrics do you need to produce the product? And here we need $1.6 equivalent fabric to produce a product. We need $0.59 equivalent prints and $0.91 equivalent CM cost. And CM cost is calculated using SMV or standard minute value. And how to calculate standard minute value we will discuss in a separate chapter, and the name of the chapter is work measurement. And one of the components of work measurement is, time study. Time study will tell you what is the standard minute value to produce a product. Here, the standard minute value to produce a product is 8.5, and the efficiency rate of the factory is 80%, and per minute cost in the factory is 0.09, and multiplication of 0.09 by 8.5 and 0.80 or 80% is equivalent to $91. So ultimately, how many components are a cost sheet? And if you go through the literature, you will find that there are three components of cost. And cost is related with pricing also. What are the three components of cost? The three components of cost are: number one is manufacturing cost, number two is non-manufacturing cost, and number three is markup. So what is ultimately manufacturing cost in literature that is aligned with the principles of accounting? There are three components of manufacturing cost. One is direct material cost, another is direct labor cost, another is manufacturing overhead. And then non-manufacturing cost is ultimately divided into two categories. One is known as the administrative expenses or administrative cost, and another is known as the sales and marketing cost. This is also known as the operating cost. And manufacturing cost is ultimately related with the cost of goods sold, and more specifically cost of goods manufactured. Those who have some basic idea about manufacturing cost, cost of goods manufactured, cost of goods sold, they are getting the idea. But those who do not have background on accounting or management, then you have to learn more about manufacturing cost, because ultimately manufacturing cost is known as the factory cost. Manufacturing cost is also known as production cost. Manufacturing cost is also known as product cost. And non-manufacturing cost is known as pre-end cost, or sales and marketing and administrative expenses, also known as operating expenses. And adding the both costs, then you will add the required amount of profit that we refer to as the markup. Then you will get the price of the product. So when you're negotiating with the buyer as a merchandiser, you must know the pricing formula. There are a lot more issues about pricing. We'll discuss more about pricing later, but today we are only looking into manufacturing cost or cost of manufacturing a product. And as I said, that there are three components of manufacturing cost. The components are direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. And if you look at the cost sheet that we have shown before you, used by the merchandisers in today's world, ultimately they're summarizing these three factors. They're summarizing these three factors, and if you can prepare a cost sheet by differentiating direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, this will be aligned with the principles of accounting. An accountant can easily align with the cost sheet you prepare to negotiate with the buyer. Direct materials means the materials that you can trace with the finished output. If this chart is the finished output and fabric is the traceable material. So as you can trace fabric, cuff, collar, button. These are known as the direct materials. But there are some indirect materials. So for example, grease is indirect materials used in, grease. One second, grease. Grease is used in garments factories to run the machine smoothly, but it is not the direct materials. This is known as the indirect materials, and the indirect materials is known as the manufacturing overhead. Direct labor, similarly, direct labor means the labor, those who are directly involved with the production process. And without that touch, you cannot imagine the finishing of the production. So direct materials means the materials who are directly associated with the production process. But there are some indirect labors. Indirect labor means the labors who are important, but without their presence, without their, how can I say, without their touch, without their presence, you can finish the production. Production step, for example, the guard man or the security man, who is also important, but without him, you can continue the production process. So the security guard is the indirect labor, and indirect labor is known as also manufacturing overhead. Other than direct materials and direct labor, all the cost in a factory is referred to as the manufacturing overhead. Say, for example, automation cost, uh, depreciation cost of the machines, electricity bill, rental of the floor. These are all manufacturing overhead. So when you will prepare the cost sheet as a learned merchandiser, what you will do, you will summarize first direct materials. And under direct materials, you will summarize, so for example, for producing shirt, fabric, then accessories. These are the part of the direct materials or trims. And direct labor, you will ultimately calculate the cost of making that we referred to in our previous cost sheet is ultimately direct labor. And manufacturing overhead. That means all other expenses is summarized as the manufacturing overhead, and predetermined manufacturing overhead rate is applied to calculate the manufacturing overhead. So you can summarize your cost sheet into three categories: direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Now we are moving into detailed analysis of the manufacturing cost, and that will be very helpful for you to design and develop a new cost sheet. Thank you very much for the moment. And we are discussing more details about manufacturing cost in our coming lecture. Okay.